Welcome back to 101 Questions Church Planters Ask. My name is Chris Highfill. I'm your host today. Welcome back. I am super excited about today's topic that we're going to cover. And the topic today is a question that I get all the time. In fact, I just got this question yesterday. A church planter asked me this question. And about once a month, a church planter that's in pre-launch phase will ask this question. And the question is this: what do I do with my launch team? And I had this same question 10 years ago as we were launching Grace River Church. I didn't know what to do with my team. I think it's really important to start with this, though. Make sure that you call it a launch team meeting, not a core team meeting. We covered this in an earlier episode. And I just want to remind you, language is super important as you build and develop culture. And language here, make sure you call it a launch team, because the difference between a launch team and a core team is pretty significant. You're launching a church together, and then once that's over with, you're able to throw a hand grenade into that team and say, hey, now everybody is equal around here. But the term core team kind of insinuates, hey, I've been around for a long time. I'm a part of the core team. And so you can't have disagreements with core team people. Core team people have favoritism and things like that. Launch team is temporary. Core team lasts forever. And so it's really important that you call, we're not going to tell you every single label that you should have for the lifespan of your church, but it's really important as you launch the church to call it a launch team. So you're having your launch team meetings. Maybe you meet every week. Maybe you meet every other week. Whatever the frequency of those meetings are, it's really important that you have some kind of agenda, that you have some kind of plan. And I'm going to give you today the top 10 list of things that you ought to do with your launch team. And maybe you're already doing some of these things with your team. Learn from some of the mistakes that I made with my launch team. And the first thing that I'm going to tell you to do with your launch team, this is a mistake that I made, is this: have fun. All right. I know that sounds super simple, but literally have a good time at launch team. Have music playing ahead of time. Have music afterwards, like background music. Make it fun. Make sure there's food there. And make sure you're well rested. There was times with my launch team that I don't think I was rested enough. And so we would have a party at our house with launch team people over, and my kids were acting crazy or whatever. I may have been a little bit short-tempered with them in front of launch team people. Like, you want to make sure that you're having a good day, right? Because that's attractive for people, and you want to be well rested and having ready to have a good time. You ought to think about launch team meetings every time you get together. Yes, you're going to do some spiritual stuff, but you're going to have a party for Jesus every single time. And so make sure that it's a good time. Make sure you're laughing. Make sure that you didn't just get in an argument with your spouse, okay? You want to prepare in advance that you're going to have a good time with your team. Also, the second thing is make sure the mission is front and center, all right? Like it's got to be obvious that the mission of God is front and center. You're launching this church, and you're not launching it so that you can be the coolest church in town that Christians can attend. The mission of God needs to be front and center, and that's this: that you're going to make disciples, that you're going to reach people that are spiritually disconnected, that you're going to reach unchurched and de-churched people. You're not launching this church for other Christians so you can develop a whole brand new holy huddle. And so I would say at every single launch team meeting, make sure that the mission of God is up front and center, okay? That's really, really critical and really, really important. Don't miss that. And so you want to make sure that you got the mission up front and really close for people so they understand. No one's confused about why this church is getting started. And you would be surprised. Early on in the life of the church, I thought that everybody knew our mission and vision. I thought that I was repeating it enough times. And I clearly wasn't, because I had a guest come and speak to my launch team. And the guest asked the question, hey, what's the mission of this church? And it was crickets. And I remember thinking, man, I thought that I've said this way too much. And the old adage or the old rule about repeating your mission is that you need to be repeating it so much that you want to throw up every time you're saying it. That's how sick of it is that you should be. And until then, people really aren't getting it. And so you got to make sure that you're repeating the mission over and over and over again. Also, at launch team, number 3 is talk about your values as a church, okay? Now, I say when it comes to mission that is something that needs to be foundational, and you should not leave it up to your launch team to develop the mission of the church, because that's already in the Bible. That's in Matthew 28. That's in Acts chapter 1, verse 8. And so there really isn't much debate about what the mission of the church should be. That's already there for us in the Bible. But I do think what's nuanced in the life of every single new church is, what will the values of this church be? And so I always tell church planters, make sure you come to launch team meetings with some values in mind, but bring a whiteboard or bring those gigantic big sticky notes along with you, and dream together about what the values of the church should be. Now, I say dream together. You need to have some of those ready to go. I like to say, when you're in this phase with your launch team deciding what the values of the church will be, it's important that it's almost like you're making cement together. You already have brought the wheelbarrow. You've already brought the water and the concrete, and you've even shoveled some of the mix in, and you're inviting them to mix with you at launch team, okay? And so you want their buy-in. You want what they're thinking about, and just simply ask questions like this. What should this new church be about? What should we value here? And everything that you value is something that can be measured, right? So in the life of every church plant, it's really interesting. Generosity always seems to be a value, right? Well, you measure generosity, right? So how can you measure it? Well, you can know what your offerings are. And so that's a way, or you could know how many volunteer hours people are committing to different service teams. You can measure that, right? So make sure that all the other values are measurable as well, okay? So that's really important, and it's important that you don't just rip those off from another church or another church plant, but you make those unique. Get 3 to 5 of those values down. You don't want too many, because you want people to be able to remember what the values are, because you also want to be able to celebrate when those values get met. I think, just to be honest with you, I think one of the values that every church plant should have is a value of fun, right? I know that's kind of tough to measure sometimes, but you should be able to measure, man, people had a good time tonight, right? Or people had a good time at our church. We had a fun Sunday. So you want to create an environment where people want to be around. That's just a suggestion. Come up with your own values, but man, I think it's really important that you're creating some kind of value system along the way. I think you also should pray at every launch team meeting. It's pretty obvious, but you want to pray for more than just the food that you ate, but carve out designated time in launch team meetings. Even carve out designated seasons in your launch team where, hey, tonight all we're going to do when we get together is we're going to pray. You may want to have launch team meetings once a month where it's just about prayer. You can't buy a move of God, okay? You can't. We've thought a lot about what makes a church plant happen, and the prayer component is one that we oftentimes overlook. And in your leadership, it's really important when you get together with your launch team that you're spending time together, intense times together, where you're praying. And you're not just praying for the health needs of the people in your group, or the person's dog who has, only 3 legs or whatever. You need to pray for your community. You need to pray for things that are broken in your community. You need to pray for marriages to be restored. You need to pray that God would provide all the finances that you'll need. You need to pray that God would provide people that are far from Him. You need to create that kind of culture and an environment. Day one with your launch team is, we're going to pray for people that are far from God. I think it's also really great to break up. You think about where you're going to meet as a church. Go pray there as a launch team. You think about the neighborhoods around that church, or even the apartment complexes around that location where you'll meet as a church. Go pray around those neighborhoods, and even designate roads for people to go pray on, and have them walk. And it doesn't have to be some weird thing, but have them take prayer walks and divide that up. We did that as a launch team, and it was a really powerful night. And it was amazing because whenever some of those people would actually show up to our church over the neighborhoods that we prayed over, we were like, man, isn't it amazing to see God come through in this kind of way? And so as a leader and as a spiritual leader, you ought to be leading your team to pray together. And so that's another avenue that you can think about when it comes to your launch team. The 5th thing is, go visit other churches, okay? This is really great to do as a launch team. Make sure that you're not just in the same routine over and over and over again as launch team. And so man, we visited other churches as a launch team, and I would get permission before you do this, like get permission from that pastor, from somebody on staff there, take them to lunch or coffee ahead of time, get that permission from them and just say, hey, we would love to learn from you guys. We're in learning mode about how to do guest services or how we should park people in the parking lot, what our service orders should look like. Like, just go and experience other churches and visit a half a dozen if you'd like, right? And take your launch team along with you, and then go to lunch afterwards, or set up a follow-up launch team meeting and do what we call a 4 helpful list. So what was right, what was wrong, what was missing, and what was confusing. And just talk about that as a launch team. Like, what was that like when we pulled up in the parking lot? What was right, wrong, missing, confusing? What was it like whenever you walked into the lobby? Was it confusing? Was there enough signage? Did you know where the bathrooms were? How was the coffee? Did it taste good? Did they serve it in a styrofoam cup or a paper cup? Like, did they have stevia? Did they have Splenda? Did they have, creamers that weren't like rotten? Like, what was it like? Was kids check-in smooth, or was it complicated? Just walk through a list of things like that. How did the service feel? Were there clear next steps in the sermon? Like, what did it motivate me to do? Like, think through all of those different nuances. And like have a conversation together and think back, well, what do our values have to say about that? And that 4 helpful list is really important, that you're evaluating things and, what was right, what was wrong, what was missing, what was confusing. And so those are be super helpful ways for you to kind of like take all of the data that you like get from these different churches and then put it into practice in your own church. Not that you're stealing or ripping off ideas. Sometimes you'll have a bad experience, and that's what you need your team to sometimes see, to go, wow, that's what it feels like to be new somewhere. And so make sure you're doing that, which leads me to the number 6 thing. Go do fun things with your group. And so one of the things that we did is we went and played bingo together as a launch team. And man, that taught us a ton, because none of us knew anything about bingo. And so people that play bingo are very regulars at playing bingo in their bingo hall. Like, it's super interesting because the bathrooms weren't clearly marked. We didn't know the rules of bingo. It was really complicated and really difficult for us. And we went and had pie that night at Perkins afterwards. And we kind of did a debrief. We did the 4 helpful list: what was right, what was wrong, what was missing, what was confusing about bingo. And there was a whole lot that was like wrong, missing, and confusing. And we were out of our element, which, guess what? Someone who comes and visits your church for the first time, they are also out of their element. And so it's important for you to feel what that feels like, so you can create an environment and a culture where when people show up on day 1, they're not confused about where to park. They're not confused about like what doorway to walk into. They're not confused about what to do with their kids. They're not confused about what's going to happen in this church service. Are we going to stand up? Are we going to sit down? How long am I going to listen to this? What's this song about? Like, all of those things. You can't assume that everyone knows what's happening in church, especially if you're reaching people that other churches aren't reaching. Like, it's actually shocking what the first 6 months are going to feel like in the life of your church whenever you reach people that are far from God, because they're not going to know any of the songs. They're not going to know when to clap. They're not going to be amening you whenever you preach. Like, all of a sudden, you don't have the home field advantage that you once did. But listen, it's an amazing ride, and those are the kinds of people that you want to reach. And those are the kind of people that we know that God is the most passionate about. You look at Luke chapter 15, and it was the things that were missing, right? So it's really important that you're creating the kind of culture where you can learn as a launch team and go explore other things. Go to festivals, go do things, go be out in the culture. Another thing is we went and visited a parade right when we moved to this new area that we were going to live in. And my launch team, there was only 6 or 7 of us at the time, but we went to a St. Patrick's Day parade. And that was one of the biggest things in the community. And we learned a ton about what makes the community tick just by going to that parade. So experience some things like that. Number 7 is meet in other places besides just your home. I know sometimes the default for a church planter is, oh, we'll just meet at our house. Meet a lot of different places. Go meet in a park and have a barbecue and get some inflatables and have a good time with your team. But also, it's a great way to meet other people. Go to restaurants and have a launch team meeting. Don't just use your home. Use other people's homes as well. It's a great chance for people that are new to your team to feel ownership. Our living room was kind of small, and so we quickly outgrew it. And so we had a person on our launch team that said, hey, if you ever need our home, feel free to use it. And so we started to. And so we had the majority of our launch team meetings weren't even at our house. And it gave other people ownership, because what people on your launch team really need is relationship and responsibility. And so you can give them that, but oftentimes we put too much of it on ourselves. So let other people provide the snacks. Like, figure out ways to give as many responsibilities as a way as you can with your launch team. That was a big mistake that I made, is I put kind of the weight of most of that all on myself and all on my wife, or all on our worship pastor, when really we had lots of people that were looking for ways to get involved very early on. And so number 8 is test them and find little ways to see who's a servant and who's not. And I had a mentor tell me to do this early on, and I tried it out. One of our launch team meetings were actually at the YMCA that we would later use as a church. And we were just using one of their community rooms because launch team all of a sudden was getting too big for somebody's living room. So we used a YMCA community room space. And instead of setting all the chairs up early, I actually waited till the first group of launch team people got there, and I left them all in like stacks of 12. And it was a test to see who on the launch team would unstack the chairs and put them into rows. And you know what's amazing is there was people that showed up and they consulted me. Well, how many chairs should we put out, right? Or how many rows should they be? And then there was other people that just came and said, well, we know we got to put them out, so let's just get the chairs out there. It was a test of leadership to see who would get involved. And I think what's really important in the early days of your launch team is, man, always be thinking, who here is really a servant? Who here is willing to do something outside of what's expected of them? Because those are the people that you can trust with more. Those are the people that you know can take big next steps with you. If they're always needing somebody to ask them to do something, they're only leading themselves. They're not probably going to be the kind of people that are going to lead others someday as well. And so test them with little things. This is really important. Share stories of life change. Number 9, share big stories of life change. You know, I talk to a lot of church planters that are frustrated with their launch team because they're not inviting people that are far from God, or they're not having spiritual conversations with people that are spiritually disconnected. And I say this whenever a planter asks me, like, what can they do to raise that temperature? I always ask, well, tell me some of your stories like that. And oftentimes they don't have stories. And as the church planter, as the lead pastor, as leaders in the movement of this new church, you need to have your own stories of what God is using you to do. And you need to find relational connections and be able to have spiritual conversations with your neighbors, or spiritual conversations with a parent on a little league team that you're coaching, or spiritual conversations with somebody that's out in the community. Like, finding ways to have those spiritual conversations early on are really important, because you need to be able to go to your launch team and go, man, listen to a conversation I had this week with a friend that I met through the Chamber of Commerce. And you can tell the story about how you had a cup of coffee with this person, and how they're far from God, and they're going to actually show up to one of our interest parties. They're going to show up to one of our preview services or to a worship night. And dude, nothing gets your team fired up like knowing that you're out there doing what you're asking them to do, which I'm pretty sure that's what Jesus would ask of us as well, right? And so we're not above any of that. So make sure that you've got your own stories, and that even as you hear stories of other people on your launch team, tell them, hey, that they're going to share the story with you personally, more than likely. Like, oh, I had a spiritual conversation with this guy that I work out with, or whatever, right? You need to say to that person on your launch team, hey, would you mind sharing that story in our next meeting and letting that be like testimonial time? Well, listen to this, because what you celebrate gets repeated, which leads me to number 10 on the list. Make sure that you're celebrating milestones. Celebrate stuff. This goes right along with number 1, having fun. But at number 10, the very last thing, is you want to develop a culture of celebration, because what you celebrate actually gets repeated. So make sure, man, you're finding ways for people to celebrate. Make sure that you're celebrating whenever somebody new comes. Make sure that you're celebrating whenever somebody invites somebody. Make sure you celebrate when somebody starts giving for the first time. You don't have to make like a public thing, right? But like find ways to celebrate that, like even with a personal note. Hey, thanks for giving to our launch team. Celebrate it, because what you celebrate gets repeated. Celebrate at baptisms. I mean, I think it's a powerful thing as a launch team to baptize before you even start public worship services. Before you have a grand opening, you ought to be baptizing people that are coming, like that are joining your launch team that have never taken that step. And that is, friend, that's a celebration, because there was a party in heaven when those people took a next step of meeting, knowing, and following Jesus. And you should try to replicate that same kind of party through baptism. And so there's lots of opportunities here with your launch team. Just don't make it boring. All right. Those are the top 10 things that you can do to help make launch team an awesome experience for people and to ensure that your launch team will outgrow you. All right. And so it's important as a leader that you're creating that kind of a culture, that you're creating that kind of environment. And I can't wait to hear the stories from you about what you did with your launch team. And so I want to say thank you so much for watching today. You're awesome. We believe in you, and we know that you're going to be able to do this. It's going to be an awesome thing. It says a lot about your leadership that you're carving out time to learn how to be a better leader and how to be a better church planter. Well, that'll do it for today. Thank you so much for watching, whether you watched on YouTube or on our podcast. Man, amazing stuff. Way to be a learner. If you have more topics that you'd like for us to cover, you can go head on over to our website at churchplantersask.com. You can submit questions there. Until next time, keep asking those questions.